blood pooled on the pristine linoleum of Trauma Room 3, a stark, terrifying crimson against the sterile white. The chief of surgery had already walked away, stripping off his gloves and declaring the man on the steel table a ghost. Kara Jennings heard the faint, stubborn flutter on the cardiac monitor that everyone else chose to ignore. She knew the man breathing out was Phoenix's most ruthless syndicate boss. Saving him meant quashing a fatal line. She grabbed the defibrillator anyway. The relentless fluorescent lights of St. Jude Medical Center flickered with a low, menacing hum. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Friday, a witching hour in downtown Phoenix where the city's darkest secrets inevitably washed up on the emergency room floor. Kara Jennings, a 24-year-old rookie trauma nurse who was barely 6 months out of nursing school. She had dark circles under her eyes, her blue scrub stained with coffee and iodine. But her hands were remarkably steady. She was meticulously restocking the crash cart when the heavy double doors of the ambulance bay blew open. There were no sirens, no standard paramedic handoffs. Instead, 3 matte black SUVs had violently hopped the curb, screeching to a halt just inches from the glass doors. 6 men in ruined, blood-soaked designer suits stormed into the triage area. They carried a makeshift stretcher constructed from a shattered door panel. "Clear the fucking room," bellowed a mountain of a man with a shattered nose and a customized Glock 19 waving recklessly in his left hand. This was Vincent Castellano, the infamous enforcer for the Russo crime family. The ER waiting room, previously occupied by minor fractures and late-night flu cases, evacuated in a chorus of terrified screams. Kara froze her fingers gripping a box of sterile gauze. Head nurse Beatrice Gable, a hardened veteran of 30 years, immediately hit the panic button under the desk. But Vincent slammed his fist down on the console, shattering the plastic casing. "Nobody calls the cops, nobody leaves." Vincent growled, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He pointed his weapon at the chief attending physician, Dr. Arthur Pendleton. "You affection me, Doc, or this hospital burns to the ground." They shoved a makeshift stretcher into Trauma Room 3. Kara was swept up in the chaotic tide, pushed into the room by the sheer force of the mobster's advance. Lying on the table, barely recognizable under a mask of his own blood, was Dominic Russo. At 32, he was the undisputed king of the Phoenix underworld, a man whose whispered name commanded city councilmen and police chiefs alike. Right now, however, he was just a piece of shredded meat. 3 bullet wounds mapped a jagged path of destruction across his torso. One had entered his right shoulder, pulverizing the clavicle. Another had torn through his abdomen, creating a catastrophic exit wound in his lower back. But it was the 3rd wound, a tight, bubbling hole just millimeters from his sternum, that was rapidly pulling him into the abyss. "Move, let me see him." Dr. Pendleton barked, his initial fear, overridden by decades of medical instinct. Kara jumped into action, her scissors slicing through Dominic's $3,000 bespoke jacket and silk shirt, exposing his heavily tattooed, perfectly muscled yet violently broken chest. "Pressure is tanking 40 over palp," Kara yelled, reading the monitor as she slapped standard leads onto his sticky crimson skin. "We need O-negative massive transfusion protocol, now. Get 2 large bore IVs in his ACs," Pendleton commanded. The room became a blur of controlled panic. Kara managed to find a vein in Dominic's left arm, despite the severe hypovolemic shock collapsing his circulatory system. She pushed the fluids, praying they would buy them seconds, but Dominic Russo was drowning in his own blood. The monitor wailed a high-pitched desperate alarm. "He's in V-Feb," Kara shouted, reaching for the paddles. "Charge to 200, Pendleton ordered. Clear." The shock lifted Dominic's massive frame off the table. He slammed back down. The monitor registered a flatline, a solid, unforgiving tone. "Push 1 milligram of AB," Pendleton said, his voice tightening. Kara injected the adrenaline. Pendleton started chest compressions, the sickening crunch of already broken ribs echoing in the sterile room. 2 minutes passed. 4 minutes. The floor was slick with Dominic blood. Vincent paced like a caged tiger near the doorway, muttering violent prayers in Italian, his gun still loosely gripped. "Doctor," Nurse Beatrice warned softly, looking at the clock. It had been 12 minutes of zero cardiac output. Even if they brought him back, his brain would be mush. Dr. Pendleton stopped compressions, his chest heaving, his scrub cap stained with sweat and blood. He looked at the catastrophic damage to Dominic's chest, then over at the flight line. He knew the politics of the city. He knew saving Dominic Russo meant inviting a war into his recovery ward. More importantly, he knew medical futility when he saw it. The man was exsanguinated. There was nothing left to pump. Time of death. Pendleton said, his voice trembling slightly as he avoided Benson's lethal gaze. 2:28 a.m. A deafening silence fell over Trauma Room 3. Benson stopped pacing, his face drained of color replaced by a terrifying hollow rage. "What did you say?" "I'm sorry," Pendleton said, backing away from the table, raising his hands. "The damage to his descending aorta, it's too massive. He bled out before he even hit the doors. He's gone." Benson lunged, grabbing the senior doctor by the throat and slamming him against the caveat medical supplies. Glass shattered. Kara screamed, but the other mobsters blocked the exit. "You fed him," Benson roared, spit flying from his legs. Vinny, stop," one of the younger mobsters yelled, pulling at the enforcer's massive shoulders. "The cops are gonna be here any second. We gotta go, man. The boss is gone. We have to secure the territory." Benson stared at Dominic's lifeless face. The mobster's brutal logic cut through his grief. If Dominic was dead, the streets would have wept within the hour. They needed to lock down the family's assets. He dropped Dr. Pendleton, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. "Leave him," Benson ordered, his voice suddenly dead and hollow. "We're right." Within seconds, the mobsters vanished, the screech of tires echoing into the Phoenix night. The ER was left in stunned, terrified silence. Dr. Pendleton, clutching his bruised throat, looked at Beatrice and Kara. "Call the morgue," Pendleton whispered, adjusting his glasses. "And call the police. Tell them to send a detail. I'm going to wash my hands." He walked out. Beatrice followed to manage the chaotic waiting room. Kara was left alone with the body of the city's most dangerous man. The silence in the room was heavy, smelling of copper and antiseptic. Kara picked up a wet towel, intending to clean the blood off Dominic's face before the coroner arrived. It was the least she could do. Monster or not, no one deserved to die like a butchered animal on a cold steel table. She gently wiped the crimson from his jawline, revealing sharp aristocratic features beneath the grime. He didn't look like a killer in death. He just looked incredibly tired. As she leaned in to clean his neck, Kara froze. It was faint. So faint she thought her own adrenaline was playing tricks on her. But there, it was a microscopic twitch in his right jugular vein. She dropped the towel and stared at the monitor. It was still a flat line. But monitors could be wrong. Leads could disconnect in a sea of blood. She pressed her bare fingers against his carotid artery. For 10 agonizing seconds there was nothing. Then, a weak, thready flutter against her fingertips. He's not dead. Kara's eyes darted to his chest. The chest wound near his sternum wasn't just a bullet hole. The tissue around his neck was violently swollen, and his trachea was deviated slightly to the left. Tension, pneumothorax. Kara realized with a jolt of horror, and the pericardial tamponade. Pendleton had missed it in the chaos. The bullet hadn't shredded the aorta. It nicked a smaller vessel and pierced the lung. Air and blood were trapped in his chest cavity, squeezing his heart so tightly it couldn't pump, mimicking cardiac arrest. If the pressure wasn't relieved, he really would be dead in less than 2 minutes. "Dr. Pendleton." Kara screamed toward the hallway. "Dr. Pendleton, get back here." There was no answer. The hallway was empty. The entire staff was either hiding or dealing with the police in the lobby. She looked down at Dominic. Fluttering pulse was fading. It was now or never. "God forgive me," Kara whispered. She wasn't a surgeon. She wasn't legally allowed to perform invasive procedures. Doing this could strip her of her license, land her in prison, and tie her to the Mafia forever. But the oath she took was to save lives. Period. She ripped open a sterile kit and grabbed a massive 14-gauge needle, the longest one she could find. She didn't have time for anesthesia. She didn't have time for a scalpel in the chest tube. She found a check in the intercostal space on his right chest, wiped it with a swipe of betadine, and drove the needle deep into the muscle and pleural space. A sharp, violent hiss echoed in the room as trapped air forcefully escaped through the needle hole. Blood bubbled up immediately. Suddenly, the flat line on the monitor broke. It spiked into a chaotic waveform, then settled into a rapid thumping sinus tachycardia. The machine began to beep rapidly, the sweetest sound Kara had ever heard. Dominic's massive chest heaved. A ragged, agonizing gasp tore from his throat. His eyes flew open. They were ice blue, devoid of warmth and utterly terrifying. Even through the fog of near death, his gaze locked onto Kara with the intensity of an apex predator. His large blood-stained hand shot up his fingers, clamping around Kara's wrist with a grip that threatened to snap her bones. Shh, it's okay, Kara said rapidly, her heart hammering against her ribs. You were dying. I just saved your life. You need to let go so I can walk. He didn't speak, but his grip slowly loosened. He was fighting to stay conscious. Kara didn't stop. She grabbed the pericardiocentesis kit. The tension in his lung was relieved, but the blood compressing his heart was still a massive threat. Utilizing the ultrasound machine, she guided a long needle just below his sternum, aiming for the sac around his heart. She drew back the plunger on the syringe, pulling out 50 cubic centimeters of dark clotted blood. Instantly, Dominic's blood pressure began to climb. The color returned to his ashen lips. What the hell are you doing? Kara whipped around. Dr. Pendleton was standing in the doorway, staring at the scene in absolute shock. He looked from the monitor to the massive needle protruding from Dominic's chest, to Kara's blood-soaked hands. He had a tension pneumothorax and a tamponade. Kara said, her voice shaking but defiant. You called it too early, doctor. He had a pulse. You performed an unauthorized surgical intervention, Pendleton yelled, stepping into the room. You're a nurse, Jennings. You could have killed him. I pronounced him. He's alive. Kara shot back. Look at the monitor. We need a cardiothoracic surgeon down here immediately. He still has active internal bleeding. I'm not dragging this hospital into a gang war because you decided to play God. Pendleton sneered, marching toward the table. Pull that needle out. We'll let him slip away. It's safer for everyone. Kara stood her ground, physically placing herself between the angry doctor and the Mafia boss. I won't let you murder him. Step aside, Kara. You're fired. Answer the second. She stays right where she is. The voice was low, rough and dripping with lethal promise. Both Kara and Pendleton froze. Standing behind the doctor was Vincent Castellano. He hadn't left the city. He had circled back, refusing to leave his boss's body behind. Now, his massive frame filled the doorway. The barrel of his Glock was pressed directly against the back of Dr. Pendleton's skull. You missed a high beat, Doc. Vincent whispered, his eyes locked on Kara with a mix of awe and dangerous calculation. But the little nurse didn't. Now you're gonna call your best surgeon down here. You're gonna fix my boss. And if he dies on that table, I kill everyone in this building. Pendleton swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. Paging surgery, he choked out. Vincent finally lowered the gun, stepping past the trembling doctor. He approached the surgical table, looking down at Dominic. His eyes were fluttering closed again from the pain and blood loss. Vincent looked up at Kara. What's your name, sweetheart? Kara Jennings. Well, Kara Jennings. Vincent said, a dark, humorless smile touching his lips. Congratulations on the promotion. You belong to the Russo family now. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in medical blackmail. St. Jude Medical Center was quietly, efficiently placed under Mafia lockdown. The entire 4th floor VIP wing was cleared out. Heavily armed men in discreet suits sat in the waiting areas, reading medical journals. They didn't care about their hands resting on concealed holsters. The official hospital records stated that Dominic Russo had succumbed to his wounds in the ER, to the police and the rifle cartels. The King of Phoenix was dead. Only a select few knew the monster was sleeping in room 402. Kara hadn't left the hospital in 2 days. She was exhausted, living off black coffee and stolen packets of graham crackers. Despite Dr. Pendleton's furious protest to high bill administration, Vincent had made the arrangement extremely clear. Kara was the only person allowed to change Dominic's dressings, administer his medications, and monitor his vitals. The Mafia didn't trust the doctors. They only trusted the woman who broke the rules to save his life. She entered the dim, quiet room, the soft hum of the ventilator and the steady beep-beep of the heart monitor, the only sounds. The blinds were drawn tight. Dominic looked different in the soft light. The dirt and blood had been scrubbed away. His dark hair curled slightly against the stark white pillow. Without the tailored suits and the terrifying reputation, he just looked like a handsome, severely injured man. The intricate tattoos snaking up his left arm, symbols of power, violence, and loyalty, were the only reminders of who he truly was. Kara checked his IV lines, adjusting the flow of the broad-spectrum antibiotics. She moved to check his chest tube, leaning closely over him to inspect the surgical site. "You're hovering," Kara gasped, dropping the sterile tape in her hand. She stumbled backward, her heart leaping into her throat. Dominic's ice blue eyes were open. They were clear, lucid, and entirely focused on her. The breathing tube had been removed hours ago, leaving his voice a deep, gravelly rasp. I was checking the drainage on your chest tube, Mr. Russo." Kara stammered frantically, trying to regain her professional composure. "Dominic," he corrected quietly. He tried to shift his weight and winced the sharp intake of breath, hissing through his teeth. "Don't move," Kara ordered, instinctively stepping forward and placing a firm hand on his uninjured shoulder. "You've had massive thoracic surgery. Your sternum is wired shut. You are being held together by surgical staples and sheer stubbornness." Dominic looked down at her small hand on his shoulder, then back up to her face. A flicker of amusement danced in his cold eyes. "You're the nurse from the ER, the one who stabbed me with the needle. The needle decompressed your collapsed lung. It saved your life." "I know." He held her gaze, and for a terrifying second, Kara felt like she was being x-rayed. He was dissecting her posture, her fear, her defiance. "Why did you do it? Your boss gave up on me. My men were gone. You could have walked away, kept your hands clean." Kara swallowed hard, pulling her hand back. "I'm a nurse. My job is to keep people breathing. I don't care who they are or what they've done." "Noble," Dominic murmured, "but dangerously naive." He slowly lifted his right hand, ignoring the IV line pulling at his skin, and gestured for her to come closer. Reluctantly, Kara took a half step forward. "Those bullets weren't from a rifle family," Dominic whispered, the effort clearly draining him. "The tape was too clean. The security cameras in my club magically glitched. My personal driver didn't show up. It was an inside job." Kara felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you telling me this? I don't want to know anything about your business." "You'll need to know," Dominic stated, his voice hardening. "Because the rat, my organization, knows I was brought to this hospital. And if they find out I survived that table, they'll come here to finish the job." Kara whispered, heart pounding on her. "Exactly." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "I can trust Benny. I can trust my inner circle guarding the door. But I can't trust the staff in this hospital. Medications can be swapped. IV lines can be poisoned. Air bubbles can be pushed into a vein." He reached out his warm, rough fingers, wrapping around Kara's wrist, not violently this time, but with an iron certainty. "You're my lifeline, Kara," he said, his thumb brushing over her racing pulse. "You don't let anyone else touch my meds. You don't let any other doctor in this room without you present. You are mine till I walk out of here." "I'm an employee of St. Jude," Kara said, trying to pull her hand away, but his grip was unyielding. "I am not your property. You made yourself a player in this game the second you brought me back from the dead," Dominic said softly, pulling her slightly closer. The scent of the antiseptic, masking a deeply masculine musk of fear and danger, was intoxicating. "If I die, Kara Finney will burn this hospital down and you along with it. If I live, I will give you the world. Do we understand each other?" Kara stared into the eyes of the devil, realizing with absolute terrifying clarity that there was no way out. The hospital doors were locked. The Mafia had the keys. "I understand," she whispered. Dominic released her wrist, his eyes fluttering closed as the exhaustion of the conversation pulled him back under. Good girl. Now, face my pillows, you're like rocks. Kara stood frozen for a moment, her wrist still burning from his touch. She had saved a life. But as she looked at the sleeping mob boss, she knew she might have just traded her own soul for it. The real nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The fourth floor of St. Jude Medical Center had become a fortress of sterile paranoia. It was day 4 of Dominic Russo's death, and the exhaustion was beginning to crack Kara's professional veneer. She had slept a total of 9 hours in the past 96, curled into a stiff vinyl recliner in the corner of room 402. Every time a monitor chimed or the air conditioning kicked on, she jolted awake, her eyes darting to the door where Vincent Castellano stood like a gargoyle. Dominic's recovery was a medical anomaly. A man with a shattered clavicle, a pierced lung, and a surgically repaired descending aorta should have been comatose on a ventilator. Instead, Dominic was propped up on 3 pillows, his jaw clenched against the agonizing pain he refused to accept narcotics for. Morphine makes you sloppy, he growled on day 2, slapping the syringe out of her hand. If they come for me, I need to feel the bullet. So Kara managed his pain with high-dose intravenous Tylenol localized lidocaine patches and sheer stubborn willpower. It was 3:15 p.m. when the heavy old door creaked open. Kara, who had been meticulously charting Dominic's fluid outputs, spun around. Standing in the doorway was Gregory, a float nurse from the intensive care unit. Kara recognized him, a quiet, mousy man with wire-rimmed glasses who usually worked the graveyard shift. Today he was pushing a small medication cart, a plastic IV bag dangling from his gloved hand. Afternoon, Kara. Gregory said